Live direct from Moscow, Russia's capital. This is RT, where it's at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, reports of heavy gunfire and explosions are reported in the Libyan capital. According to rebel commanders, the firing signals the start of a final onslaught on Gaddafi's stronghold. But eyewitnesses on the ground say it is all misinformation. For more on the actual situation there, we can cross live to Mahdi Nazemroaya, a political analyst who is in Tripoli for us. Now, Mahdi, can you confirm the reports that there is heavy gunfire right now and shelling in Tripoli?
There is gunfire, but it's sporadic, it's not organized, and it's meant to deliberately break down the morale of the population. The main point of the attacks in Tripoli, which are sporadic, is to break down the morale here and cause panic. In fact, the media here at the Rexus Hotel, where I stay at, actually it's called the Swiss now, has been part of this disinformation campaign. They're talking about airlifts. The media is talking, quoting the International Organization for Migratory Workers. They're quoting them and saying migratory workers here want to flee. That is not true at all. They just want to feed the panic here and make the regime collapse.
Okay, now you mentioned this disinformation campaign. Could the reports be deliberate disinformation spread by NATO, and who else could be involved?
The mainstream media would happen to be involved. I can tell you right now, Reuters put out a release that was widely quoted, saying that one Indian, for example, citizen who was killed here, or from Bangladesh, I'm sorry, one foreign national was killed here a few days ago when NATO was intensely bombing civilian infrastructure. And they didn't mention the civilian infrastructure, I want to add. Well, they quoted that this foreign national was a security guard. This was misinformation. This was not correct. It was changed later. They have been fueling and feeding the psychological war against this country. They want Tripoli to be in panic. That's the whole aim. There's snipers here that are attacking people. There's no aim here, no organized aim. There's snipers attacking people, and there's terrorist attacks here. This is just meant to cause trauma here and make people panic. And that's the truth.
Okay, now the rebels faced annihilation back in March before NATO stepped in. Right now they're approaching Gaddafi's strongholds, arguably only thanks to coalition airstrikes. When NATO ends its intervention, won't that leave a massive military power vacuum in the country, or could the alliance be planning to stay just like it's doing in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Let's not use the word airstrikes. Let's use the word bombardment of civilian infrastructure. They've been bombing all the civilian checkpoints that are mostly are protected and manned by volunteers. It's NATO that's been doing all the fighting. So when the media says the insurgents are moving in, or the so-called rebels or revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them, that is not correct. It's NATO that's doing all the hard work here. And they will not come into Tripoli. The population here will oppose them, but they want this city to be on the brink of collapse because of the psychological war. Can you repeat the rest of that question?
Well, actually, my question now is, you're saying that it's NATO that is doing the bombing. Does that mean that the rebels themselves are directed by NATO and that they really have to follow NATO's hard line, if you will, if they do gain control?
Absolutely. They coordinate with NATO. NATO is trying to deny this, but they're NATO's proxies on the ground here. This is a NATO operation. NATO has bombed the Mint here. NATO has bombed the hospitals here. NATO has bombed... Why would NATO bomb the checkpoints guarding the city? These checkpoints aren't a threat to any civilians here. They're here for security, and NATO's bombing them. In fact, the reporters here are giving the locations of the checkpoints. When the reporters here went to Zlitin, they gave the locations of the checkpoints through satellite radios to NATO. They directly liaisons with NATO headquarters and military officials. And the next night, the checkpoints were attacked. That very night, the checkpoints were attacked by both NATO and the insurgents. So yes, the media here is part of the war machine.
All right, and thank you very much. That was Mahdi Nazemroaya, who is in Tripoli for us right now. We'll keep you up to date as more information becomes available.